Hey there, Simon here. We're taking the week off for some much needed R&R. I believe as I speak, Devang is preparing his resume to be the new head coach of the Toronto Raptors. I have my fingers crossed for him. In the meantime, let's revisit something from our vault and look at the one and only David Nalbandian. Remember that time this dude beat the top 3 in the world at Madrid? Pepperidge Farm remembers. Nah, that joke sucks, I'm sorry. What is true, though, is it was a tremendous story. Easily one of the most insane achievements in the last 20 years and well worth another look and listen. Hope you enjoy it, and we'll talk to you next week for the red clay of the European clay court season.
Hello and welcome to the Open Air Podcast. My name is Devang Desai, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Simon Bushell. We're going to go way back in time. This moment in time in tennis produced something that we will never see again. Probably because it's just, I don't think it'll line up this way. But Bush, this is an accomplishment by a player that truly fit that enigma bill that is so sloppily thrown around when people get too lazy to describe someone in great detail. I think it's fair to say David Nalbandian legitimately was the enigma.
Certainly so, yes. And I think anytime there is a discussion about who is the greatest player to never win a Grand Slam on either the men's or the women's side, his name comes up very, very quickly in that conversation, just given the skill level that he had and the overall career that he had in terms of the players that he beat and some of the heights that he reached on the professional tour. He never could quite translate it into winning a Grand Slam, but what an unbelievable player, an unbelievable talent, and someone who technically, if you watched both forehand and backhand, has to be right up there with all-time greats in terms of when you look it up in the dictionary of how to hit both a forehand and a backhand.
What do you want to do, Bush? First, you want to do where the ATP was at in 2007, or maybe a deeper dive into Nalbandian himself? Maybe we'll start with the Argentine as a kid growing up.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? And I think a lot of stuff has been written about him just on the basis that he retired not too long ago, even though it doesn't seem, he kind of seems like he came and went so quickly, right? And I think we've been so blessed to have 3 or 4 players around the top of the game who have had very prolonged and extended careers that we tend to forget that players don't usually have 25-year careers and win Grand Slams their entire career. And I think that is true for David Nalbandian as well, which he was an exceptional junior player. And he so often gets mentioned in the same breath as his record against Roger Federer, of course, because he beat him at the US Open. He beat him in the final. And Federer is on record as saying that Nalbandian is a very, very difficult player for him to play in the juniors. And they are interlocked so much in their junior career because they each wanted to beat each other really badly. They were both at the top of the sport at that point in time. And everyone had the expectation that this Argentinian kid was going to go on and be something really, really special. And I think if you look back at that era of junior tennis, it really is a who's who of players that have gone on to have exceptional careers. But yeah, his junior career was really quite magnificent. He obviously won the US Open in singles, and it sort of parlayed to his early career, which you would say is the best part of his career. And it lined up perfectly with his run to the Wimbledon final in 2002. And you won't find a much more different final than the 1 year previous. 2001, of course, we covered on this show. And you go from 2001 to 2002, where the final is between David Nalbandian and Leighton Hewitt. How times have changed and how that court changed at Wimbledon.
Grass court tennis died on that day when that final was created. I legitimately had no recollection of this 2002 Wimbledon final. I knew Leighton Hewitt won it because he has a couple of slams, but I could not recall really anything from this match. So I had to go back and look, but it is jarring. It is jarring how much everything changed really in a year, even though you could say that Goran and Pat Rafter were on their way out. It was this new baseliner era and guys who could really physically go toe to toe with you for seemingly ever. And I think the David Nalbandian type was someone who could sling the ball with just extreme power, but also I thought an extremely smart guy, like a very smart player that I think found angles better than most. He didn't win that final against Leighton though. And I guess that is really the closest he came, Bush, to capturing a slam.
Definitely, yeah. And I think it is true that tournament kind of stands out in a lot of ways at Wimbledon because they did change the grass and it did give us a final that was so different. And I think they kind of recognized they went too far in a direction that allowed grinders and heavy hitting baseliners to be successful at that tournament. And I do think that plays a part in this era of when Nalbandian was actually at the height of his career. And I know we're going to touch on 2007 at Madrid because the run that he goes on there is truly exceptional. But even around that period of time, so he reaches the final Wimbledon 2002, he does all right. I mean, he makes the semifinals at the French Open, and his 2004, 2005, I remember this period of time for him very distinctly because I thought he was an exceptional player. I really, really enjoyed watching him. The term enigma gets thrown around, but like in a lot of ways, he reached the top 5 in the world. He was just a really, really damn good player and someone that really doesn't get spoken about a whole lot.
What bothers me is I think you could make a very strong case that he was the most talented of the Gaudios or the Corias, like his countrymen or his contemporaries at the time. Like he had the best game, the biggest game, and he just couldn't put it together at the biggest moments, even though he had his Masters Series titles and beat the top guys. It felt like it kind of fell apart at the business end of the biggest tournaments, like it did the French Open against Gaudio in 2004, which is a tournament he definitely should have won in hindsight. Push, remember that final? Like that is a slam for you, David. Like that is it.
It's true, yeah. And looking back at it, it seems astonishing that Rafael Nadal did not win it as a 14-year-old.
He was the ball kid. He was the ball kid and the player at the same time winning the match. They somehow let it happen. I think they changed the rule, but it was crazy.
One thing I will mention about Nalbandian is that we talk so much about different players and what it takes to really take that final step to be an all-time great, to be a Grand Slam winner, to be someone who hangs around the top 3 levels of the sport and really is a transcendently good player. I would make an argument, and I know this is going to sound like hyperbole, is that I think David Nalbandian is more talented than Novak Djokovic in terms of his strokes, in terms of how he reads the game and everything that goes into it. But everything else kind of wasn't there. Nalbandian's not in the greatest of shape, put it that way. No. The guy enjoyed his lifestyle a heck of a lot. He looked a little rotund around the middle sometimes when you watched him play early on in his career. And it certainly is the case in 2007 when you're watching. I was making some notes the other day. The man is born sweating. Like, I think if he was walking down a flight of stairs, there would be a constant drip of sweat.
I needed to go into the Farmer's Almanac to figure out how hot it was in Madrid at this time, because the level of perspiration instantly from the first time a ball was struck in any of these matches was shocking and a bit alarming, to be honest. But that was an Nalbandian way. That and his hair was soaking wet all the time, which he reminded me of like a working class wrestler who's like really reliable to put on a good show, but you're like, what is going on, really?
Nail on the head with the wrestling comparison, because I thought his hairstyle looked very similar to like PlayStation 2 era wet hair
SmackDown
professional wrestler on. Yeah, exactly.
I guess before we get into the Madrid tournament itself, 2007 as a whole, we mentioned Nalbandian as a guy that's firmly in that conversation of the top 20 or so players, but this is still Roger Federer's reign. He wins 8 titles in 2007, tournament finals, 12 he makes, still the top dog, but this is definitely a moment, I think, Bush, where things begin to shift. And it's no longer Roger running around and just bludgeoning people for fun, except for clay. Like, this is now when Novak Djokovic is the most improved player of the year. Rafa Nadal is firmly the second best player in the world. And eventually we would obviously see what was to come for that. But like the guys that were chasing Roger, you found out really who was up for it in 2007, I thought.
Yeah, a good year for tennis, I would say overall. If you were going to pick one out of the decade, this is a good one to go back and watch some really, really excellent matches. 1, 2, 3 is Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, and I think they are in that order at this period in time. I don't think there's any denying that, really, that Federer still is the man at this period of time. He is still in that very semi-pretentious sort of regal Federer era where he's walking onto court acting like he's, a monarch and, gently giving the slow cup wave
looks extremely pissed off when he lost in Madrid. We'll get to that, but I've never seen him look. He's like, get out of here. When he shook hands with him, that was crazy.
I don't lose. I don't lose to people. That's not what happens.
And you noted to me, Bush, that Roger's gear at this tournament was the best that he had. And I think it's because for some reason in 2007, it was like everyone on tour had to have a pattern on their shirt. Like you were not allowed to come onto court without a patterned shirt and like have like 4 different colors going at once, except for Roger. Like he was the only guy with like a true color combination. Everyone else had the most ridiculous patterns, which seemed to be tour mandated because they all had them.
Well, I say that it's a good outfit for Federer. I mean, I think you're probably right in the sense that
like compared to these other guys, compared to these other guys, like it's just a shirt. It's just a thing you get. Like I don't know what the mandate was for. Like Jarko Niemanen's coming out with a 5-color matching t-shirt short combo. Like why are we doing this?
I think we do proselytize the 2000s a little bit too much, to be honest. There's some bad fashion in this era. Very, very bad fashion. And it's around sort of your Lost is on television, your Matthew Fox's is your heartthrob around this period of time. And if you look back at some of the wares that Matthew Fox is wearing in this period of time, it's pretty damn awful, it has to be said. It's pretty poor.
Wow. It's such a targeted attack on Matthew Fox. I don't want to dig too deep to uncover the real reason to your animosity, but 13 years ago, it was a long time. It was a very long time ago. And just another reason to, I guess, endlessly fawn over the big 3 and their longevity. The other guys in the top 20 at the end of 2007. It's Fed, Nadal, Joker, number 4, Bush. Can you guess?
Oh, that's a really good question. If I had to take a stab, maybe Davydenko? Maybe Ljubicic?
No, you got it. Davydenko, David Ferrer was 5, Andy Roddick 6, Fernando Gonzalez 7, Gasquet 8, Nalbandian 9, Robredo 10, Andy Murray 12. Of those guys, obviously, the big 3 are still playing. Shouts to Richard Gasquet because he's still out there as well. Andy is trying, but these cats are also there. The rest of these guys are legitimately tour directors or coaches. Tommy Haas, James Blake, Carlos Moya, Ljubicic, Jusni. They're literally men coaching now while these guys are still playing.
That is absolutely insane. And I think that is the greatest respect that we can play to these 3 dudes. Is you look at their peers and look who's around them and what they're doing. It's astonishing, really. And that's the best I can say for it. When the person who is your direct competition as a junior, in the case of some of the big 3, is now a rally driver in a different sport, you know you've probably had a prolonged and good career.
And as much as Novak's dad's comment about how it's a bit ridiculous that Roger is playing and like he wants to be playing till he's 40 because he's obsessed. I'm like, yeah, he is obsessed. Like, no, yeah, that's it, man. Like that obsession with winning is why these guys are at where they're at. Like, you should know this. Your son is exactly the same.
Can you imagine being so good at something that
like,
you've been doing it for...
Why would you stop?
30 years. Yeah, exactly. 30 years you've been doing it for. You're at 40 years old or close to 40 and you're still arguably the second best player in the world. That's astonishing. That is absolutely incredible.
And again, that convince yourself to stop in that position if it's not tennis or something else. It's a tough ask. So just, again, another shouts to the big 3 for being them. But this episode isn't about them. It's about the guy that took them all out at the same tournament. The only time that has ever happened. I dare say the only time that it'll ever happen. After the break, it's David Nalbandian's ridiculous Madrid miracle. Welcome back to the Open Air Podcast, Simon. We are in Madrid. It's 2007. The mood, it's tense. I think it's tense because Madrid is a completely different tournament in 2007. It's a hard court, and it might be the best damn hard court we've ever seen, ever.
Dude, we are so ready for a Madrid Open episode at some point, just given the politics and everything involved in this tournament. And we could touch upon the fact that in 2012, yes, we did have blue clay at this tournament, which is still the handedly the best thing that's happened to tennis. And I'm sad that it's not there at all. But I should touch on something. Madrid is a really big tournament in Europe, and it's a massive tournament for the swing of the tennis tour at that period of time. Because if you look at the winners of this tournament since 2002, there's only been a few winners. Agassi, Ferrero, Safin, Nadal, Federer, Nalbandian, Murray. That's it. Zverev won in 2018, but he doesn't count because he's cancelled. But everyone else, that's a massive list. That's an enormous list since 2002, and it shows the quality of the field of this tournament.
I went to the Madrid Open a few years ago when I was in Spain for work, and easily the coolest tennis-related sporting experience I ever had. I got to see American Steve Johnson just get destroyed on clay and really absorb that and be like, what are you doing out here, doc? Like, this ain't for you. So that was fun. And the experience was different. And I've been to tournaments in North America, and I feel like that European cliche of like people care slightly less was definitely true at that tournament, but it was clay then. It was totally different. Like the Gajah Majika, like the center court with the clay, you really get like an intimate feel. I feel like on TV, at least, Bush 2007, this hard court feels a bit cold. But realistically, it's probably the fastest hard court that we might have ever seen. And I think it produced then some excellent conditions for a guy like Nalbandian, who can hit just the absolute like piss out of the ball, as we say.
Totally, yeah. And I think it served him really well because in a lot of ways, David Nalbandian and Roger Federer are quite similar. And I know that sounds weird. And it sounds weird in terms of when you think about them aesthetically, just you see sort of this squat looking Argentinian with the long swings in both backhand and forehand against this sort of regal looking, single-hander. But they both stay very, very close to the baseline. They stay glued to the baseline. They want to control the rally and the point. And they're both very, very aggressive. And they try and win with a 1-2 punch. And realistically, this is a perfect setup. It is a perfect setup and court for David Nalbandian to play on because all he has to do is read the game really well, which he's exceptional at, stand on the baseline and hit the bejesus out of the ball. And when the court's that quickly, you get full value for your shots. I love this court. I love watching this tennis, and I was a huge fan of watching his entire run here.
The run is exceptional. We mentioned who he beat, but it was no cakewalk to get to the quarterfinals. Arnaud Clement, Thomas Berdych, Juan Martín del Potro as a wild card, dispatched in the third round. Then it's Rafa. They had never played coming to this match, Bush, which I thought was evident.
I think it's very evident. And I mentioned the sweat. I don't know, I'm going to sound weird because I constantly talk about this, but he is a very, very sweaty man. And these are two very sweaty individuals. And I know it's Madrid and I know it's the time of year. But if you watch this highlights package, it is like it's a monument to, that shelving section of your like Indigo or your chapters where there's like the mummy porn section where you have like a sweaty man on the cover. That's basically what this match is.
I don't know how did you think that analogy was going to resonate strongly with a lot of people? Because I'm not aware of that section at Indigo, but I know what you're saying, kind of, and I'll keep going with you here. The other thing is like Nalbandian's unseeded, and Rafa is like the kid, like the new kid on the block, but everyone loves him. The crowd loves him. The crowd loves him because they're in Spain, but also it's the idea of you're watching one of the greats in action, and he's still basically a teenager, which leads to a very awkward situation because we're not exaggerating when we say this. Nalbandian kicked the crap out of Rafa. 71 minutes, 6-1, 6-2, an absolute masterclass, and you can hear it at the end of the match. The crowd is absolutely stunned.
He's done it. And it's met at best by muted applause because the fans have been stunned into silence by the performance this afternoon of the former world number 3.
Obviously, it's a different Rafa. He's still a kid, plenty of room to grow as he did, but it's still very jarring to see anyone dispatch Nadal like that. I don't care how young he was.
Remember we were talking a week ago about how when Nadal loses, he still plays all right. He still has a very decent level, and he almost never lets his level down to a point that he just outright tanks a match. Same is true in this match. Nadal is fine. Like, he looks all right. He's not like he's not playing his best at all, but Nalbandian just hits it past him. It's as simple as that. When you have a court that's this quick, and you have a guy who is seeing the ball like a football and is on top of you and nothing you can do. You're not getting him out of a rhythm. You're not getting it out of a sweet spot. He's just standing there and delivering. And this is probably a good time to mention the racket of David Nalbandian. I know I'm a stickler for this stuff, but I do think it's very interesting. His racket is so heavy and so stiff, and the balance point on it is so like head heavy that I don't think I could swing it. I genuinely think if I got one of his actual rackets and tried to hit it on a tennis court, it might break my entire arm.
Like it's not an exaggeration to just like suggest that an average person or like someone walking in off the street and picking up this racket could not use it on a court to like hit playable shots. That is how of a random machine that David Nalbandian uses, right? Like this isn't something you can like pick up off the rack anywhere, I feel like.
Well, let's say an average swing weight overall for a racket is about 300 to 315 grams. So that's the weight that's coming through when you're striking the ball. So full swing and the weight that the ball will hit the ball at. Nalbandian's is about 380. Now that is, just imagine how much weight is coming from behind the ball when it's being struck. And it's no wonder he's able to hit these winners. It's just ridiculous the amount of power that he's able to control it with. You have to have exceptional technique, and you have to basically be superhuman. You have to have been raised since you're 2 years old to hit a perfect tennis ball in order to be able to swing this thing. And I could sit and watch him hit backhands all day. When he's playing against Rafa here, it's just gorgeous. It's so beautiful.
He hit some shots behind Rafa in rallies that just jaw-dropping. Because again, like it's really hard to put Nadal in that situation positionally, and he did it repeatedly. He made Rafa look very uncomfortable, and especially in net, where Nadal has come a long way, but he looked very bad there. It was a shocking result, and I think Nalbandian admitted, he's like, everything went right. This is just my day. I think Rafa wasn't at his best, but a long road ahead, because up next is the most improved player in 2007, the guy that so much was expected of, the guy that, he's dominating in 2020, some 13 years later. It's Novak Djokovic sporting an absolutely hideous outfit. One of the most offensive shirt choices I've seen in some time.
And I know this podcast is global and the tennis world is global, but I always enjoy bringing some British humor and British sayings to this podcast. One that comes to mind for this is the state of this, the state of the outfit. And I think that's probably true for this. It's a shocker. It's a real shocker.
This guy had 20 minutes to get to the airport. And he's like, you know what? I just throw something in my bag. Maybe it's a training gear. Maybe the sponsor sent it over accidentally. It doesn't matter. I'll use it. And he rocked out with this on the court. 2007 Novak, he's very much the understudy to the other guys, even though I think the age is very close or closer with Rafa, but he's still like that guy who has some health problems every now and then. And you don't know which Novak you're going to get. I mean, he's accomplished some pretty amazing things already in 2007. He was excellent in Canada, but the book not out on Novak. People are not totally sure. And I think this match against Nalbandian in the semifinal, Novak's fitness level, his health level is in question just a bit. And David Nalbandian is absolutely firing once again on all cylinders.
I think it's interesting that you touch upon the overall physical nature of what Djokovic is like at this period of time. And I mentioned Nalbandian and his overall fitness around this period of time. You watch the handshake between Nalbandian and Nadal. Doesn't get said often enough. We talk about Nadal with the big muscles and everything. Nadal's an enormous human being. For a professional athlete and as a tennis player, he's nearly 6'2", and he towers over Nalbandian at the net. It looks like a child that Nadal's standing next to when he gives the handshake. And I think it's true here as well, because we're talking about Djokovic. I talk about the baggy clothing, and I think it's probably true here, right, as well. Like,
he's just
the
really
clothing's
skinny.
Awful.
He's skinny.
He's
hell,
really
right?
skinny. Yeah. He's young. He's not built into his frame, and I'm not excusing the clothing company, because I think you got to work with your dude here, right? You got to give him a break. You can't send him out there. Give him a lifeline, for goodness sake.
At least a couple of options, right? Like, you got to have a plan B, a plan C, possibly a plan D in this case, because I don't know what was going on here, but I don't think this shirt was the most offensive moment of this semifinal. I think it was David Nalbandian just, how can you beat someone up without hitting them? I think it's a euphemism, but he really beat up Novak, and He's a bigger guy, a fitter guy in this situation. Novak didn't look right. The commentators make several allusions to it. He does have a bad rap. He's got a bad reputation at this point. Novak does, about his like body and his fitness, and it's a straight sets win for David Nalbandian. He's beat two of the top 3 players in the world. It's another upset, and again, the crowd is like, what the hell just happened?
He's done it. Back-to-back world-class wins for the Argentine. No question about the fact that Djokovic was really struggling today in terms of the energy levels, but Nalbandian was able to take advantage of it just as he did yesterday against Rafael Nadal, who played poorly. Nalbandian could very much end up number 1 at the end of the week, at least as far as this tournament's concerned.
The commentators just completely, Rafa was horseshit. He was terrible. But, I mean, good for him. Good for Nalbandian, I guess. Yeah, good for him. Novak should be ashamed he came out there. I mean, I guess that's a win for David Nalbandian. Cool. Like, it was just so nonchalantly like, all right, yeah. He just beat 2 of the top guys in the world.
Couple of points on this. First of all, Novak Djokovic, a period of a time he's going to want to forget because it's very, very close to Tony Wonder in the beard, mustache sort of combination. Tony Wonder from Arrested Development. It's a poor look. He's probably going to want to have this one back, I would say. We've all had periods of time where we've had facial hair that we regret immensely. And I think this is probably going to be one for Djokovic as well. We've all been there when we're 19, 20 years old, where we've tried it a little bit too hard with the facial hair. Except usually we're not watched by a couple of million people when we're playing as professional athletes.
Culturally at this time, what's the, you have Avril Lavigne is singing hits, Plain White Tees, Sean Kingston. It's a really dark time, culturally, I feel like, for number 1 singles, but...
Well, you say that, Devang, but you have very easily read those off, which has to be from memory.
There's no way, yeah.
I feel like you're hiding something in terms
of the many useless things I've memorized. It is the Billboard 100 from 2007, which includes also Umbrella by Rihanna. Still a hit. It still goes. It's another shock. It's another what just happened moment. Nalbandian now, I think, it's hitting now. He's like, okay, can I do this? Quote, this is very important win for me. I haven't had a good year. Quote, I had some physical problems this year, but I've been working hard, regaining confidence, and today I got the reward on the court. It was a weird year because he mentions that he wasn't right. David Nalbandian started at 8 in the world and he ended at 9, but in between, it was extremely rocky, like he mentioned.
He was a bit all over the place, and I think that's true of his entire career from those points in 2004, 2000. Really, you would argue from the point that he won the World Tour Finals against Federer in 2005 in that famous match where I believe Federer was actually playing with a walking stick by the end of the final. It was a bit all over the place, wasn't it? And I think he did struggle a lot. I think Nalbandian definitely struggled with maintaining motivation, maintaining fitness. And when you had 3 players as extraordinary as that we have had over the last decade and a half, the level required is very, very high. And you would make the case that he lacked a little bit of professionalism sometimes. He was still a very hard worker, of course, but what was required to be the 3rd best player in the world was to be Novak Djokovic in that period of time, which is saying something of the immense caliber of player that was around then. And I do think it's funny, if you watch the pair of them play, you watch Djokovic and Nalbandian play, Nalbandian is just Djokovic in 2020, really, on a hard court at this period of time. He's just in complete command of the ball, grinding on the baseline with immense power. His movement's astonishing. Djokovic is very, very erratic in this match. Much more erratic than we're used to seeing him. And I think that's one of the things that we don't really give enough credit for, is how unbelievably solid the Serb is now in just all facets of his game. And there was periods of time around this when he's 3 in the world, when he's 4 in the world, and he's still young, where he's just, one factor of his game is just always a little off. There's always something with this kid around this period of time. Either it's the serve, or it's the second serve, or he's slapping a forehand into the net. Or it's, the water's not positively charged enough, or there's too much bread around. You know, the list goes on. And I think there's that famous clip of Roddick talking where he goes in the long list of ailments that Djokovic has. And I think that was the period of time where really no one really liked him. I guess that really hasn't changed a lot in a lot of ways, has it?
I think that was the 2007 Australian Open. So it was this year when that went down. It was a big deal. You know, I think Novak just took a lot more risks back then too. Miscalculated ones because he was trying to end points a lot earlier because physically he just couldn't do it and he wasn't there. And that was acknowledged by him and clearly something he's worked on very well because he is where he is now. But you're right. He was persona non grata in some ways and a lot of that hasn't changed. I think, again, every time we talk about Novak, there's a lot in his favor in terms of the bouginess and stuffiness and straight up bigotry that is prevalent in the tennis world against outsiders or people who are not from the same areas and stuff like that. That's definitely something that Novak and his family faced. And I think they were still facing that big time when he was a kid or younger in 2007. So that was the semifinal. It's Roger Federer in the final. It's Roger in a very clean Nike outfit, Bush. But you're right. This is like Roger's beginning to think about changing the constitution to make himself permanent king. He's like, can I just eschew elections? We don't need any more challengers. I am the guy. Like, I can be the guy.
It's interesting watching him here, isn't it? Because you tend to forget seeing him with the full head of hair, the full, like, fully Pantene model sort of look, dressed very cleanly, very nice Nike outfit. Looks like $1 million walking onto court, acts like it in a lot of ways. You could see why some people didn't like him at this period of time. I think if you were in the camp and you fully were on board with watching this dude, you would think, okay, this is the best person in the world. I fully admit I was in that camp. I was fully wearing the Federer hat at this point. But you could see how he would be grating to people who didn't like him at this period of time. Very, very arrogant on court, a lot of swagger. A lot of strutting around, and quite frankly, kind of deserved given how good he was at this period of time.
Well, I mean, he's hitting shots that deserve strutting afterwards. Like, there's some racket work that I don't think has ever been seen, and it's shot. Like the first set, he comes out and is absolutely laying waste, and it feels like the procession is on. It's 6-1. It's smooth sailing. I think the crowd is comforted by this return to normalcy. Like, we've had David Nalbandian destroy potential blockbuster matchups down the road because he was playing out of his skull. But Roger was amazing in the first set. And yet, somehow, I think that of the many incredible things Nalbandian was able to do in Madrid, I think that the ability to somehow come back now against Roger in 2007, who is the best player in the world, without question, there's no doubt. Shocker. It's David Nalbandian coming back in the second set to take it 6-3. And Bush, there's a moment early in the third set where he breaks. I think it was at 1-1, where you never really see Roger shook in like the 05 to 07 era. Like, it's very rare. He did lose some matches, of course, but I got a real sense of, oh, what? Like, how? And I think you heard it from him after the match where it's like that realization is kicking in. This guy might just be on a heater.
Certainly. Absolutely. And I think there is also a certain part of this as well that Nalbandian's a terrible matchup for Federer. Like, Nalbandian at full flight on the surface is an awful, awful matchup. And I think this is how Djokovic has been so successful in latter career against Federer as well, which is Federer's great in the first set and everything that he does works really hard. But Nalbandian is not taking a step back. He will not move off the baseline. He stands and tries to trade blows with him. And I think Federer tries to bully players so much that when someone does it back to him as well and is timing the ball as well as Nalbandian is, and he's able to read where Federer's shots are because, you know, they've been playing since they're 6 years old on the tour, it's a really, really bad position for Federer to be in. And when that period of time that you're talking about in the third set, he knows he's in a fight. He knows he's playing against a guy who is playing as well as him, if not better. And Federer's playing really, really well, and it's not working. And I can't think of how many times that would have been the case during this period of time where you're the number one player in the world. Everything you usually do works. It's worked in the first set, and yet the other guy is actually better than you.
I mean, just a lot of people didn't believe they were better than Federer. Like, a lot of people just straight up went away after losing the first set. And just that lack of belief. And you're right, Nalbandian had no problem in that regard. He maintained the lead in the third set and held out the champion in Madrid 2007. It's David Nalbandian with, I mean, you got to hear it from the announcers themselves. It's remarkable.
And there it is. Nalbandian's first ever Masters Series title, and what a way to win it over Roger Federer. He dropped the opening set in breathtakingly quick time, but he hit back.
You're not kidding. That first set was so quick. It is shocking if you were not aware of what happened afterwards and you went away and did not check the score until many hours later. If you had looked back and saw that Roger lost that match, I think you'd be incredulous, and rightfully so. That's how magic this week was for David Nalbandian. Bush, the third player after Boris Becker and Novak himself to defeat the world's top 3 players in a single tournament. I mean, we love hyperbole on this show. We love to wax poetic about the past, possibly because we've been forced to the last few months. But I honestly, this will never happen again. These guys are getting old now as well, so it's impossible probably that they'll be in the same tournament long enough to make it happen. And all of these other factors, but just the way it all worked out, the way the tournament was set up, we're never going to see this again.
No, and completely beating them on merit as well. You wouldn't say any of them played particularly badly. I mean, Djokovic was struggling a little bit, you would argue, but I mean, he was struggling with everything in 2007. The match I would encourage everyone to watch, of course, the Federer final is one because of the level of talent of both players and the period of time that it's Federer. But the Nadal one is really astonishing to watch. You want to know how good the level that Nalbandian got to in this tournament, and just given the surface and how well he was seeing the ball, he makes Nadal like a child. He makes Nadal like a junior player. And this is Rafael Nadal. It's really one of the most incredible runs you will ever see, and one of the most remarkable tournaments I think I can ever remember in my life.
We'll talk post-tournament and what happened to Mr. Nalbandian after the break. Welcome back. Wrapping up another episode of the Open Air podcast, David Nalbandian's remarkable Madrid Open in 2007. Bush, also made the doubles semifinals in this tournament with Guillermo Cañas before losing to the Bryan Bros. I noticed in your notes you have some suspicions here.
Well, Guillermo Cañas in 2007 also beat Roger Federer twice. He beat him in Indian Wells and he beat him in Miami. This is off the back of Guillermo Cañas being banned for doping. Good friends between these two. Obviously doubles partners. Cañas has some history with some, let's say, favorable narcotics. I'm not saying anything is here, but it wouldn't surprise me. And I don't want to perjure myself on this podcast, but do you think there is something slightly suspicious about this run here?
I don't like how you set me up to perjure myself, possibly. I don't like how this setup was like, I don't know what I think, but Devang, why don't you put something on the record for various attorneys? So Cañas was booked and then came back, correct? Like he was now reinstated, or is this pre his suspension?
No, this is post suspension. He was suspended in 2006, I believe.
Right,
so
okay.
This is, I believe he beat Federer in Indian Wells. It might have been his first tournament back, I want to say. I think that was the storyline.
What's wild is that Fed beat Cañas at the Madrid Open in the same tournament in the third round. I mean, these guys are just going around the world together. So it's not that we're like, whoa, they played each other. And it's like, no, it's a professional tour that's traveling to all the same places. There was not a conspiracy here, though. It is an interesting note, Bush, and I'll let you keep your tinfoil hat for one more week. But for Nalbandian himself, 25-18 in the tour rankings is a huge moment for him because, like we said, 2007 was not a good year for him in terms of consistency. He was all over the map, really. But it was definitely the high point. Plays at the 2007 Paris Masters where he beats Roger again, this time in the third round. Ferrer in the quarterfinals, Gasquet in the semifinals, and then he wins his second Masters Series title. 2007, I mean, this is probably the peak, Bush. He doesn't get a slam, but he gets two of the biggest titles in his career. The biggest ones, I guess you could say. The Masters title, the ATP Cup, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the ATP Cup certainly probably the most prestigious out of that bunch, but in terms of overall runs and the players that he beats and overall standard of tennis that he gets to, I think it's it's not arguable that it's not this period of time in his life. I mentioned that match between Nadal and Nalbandian in Madrid. The Paris one, equally as much of a beatdown.
6-4, 6
Perhaps
love.
even more so. Yeah, how often have you seen Nadal bageled? And it's actually very, very sort of sad in some ways to watch him just being mowed down in this final. It's another one that I do suggest going back and watching the highlights for, because the level that Nalbandian is on at that period of time, if he could have sustained that level for a year, for a calendar year, I mean, he would have been right. He would have been world number one. There's no denying it. Like he's head and shoulders above everyone else he's playing at this period of time.
That win in Paris got Nalbandian back into the top 10 at number 9, where he'd finished the year. And after Paris, he became the first player to defeat the number 1 and 2 players in consecutive tournaments and then win the tournament. It's a weird stat. It's definitely one that feels cherry-picked, and that's because it was. It's a career, we love watching this guy play. I think collectively, Bush, among the first things we said to each other when we talked about tennis when we met was our mutual admiration for David Nalbandian, and it's easy to see why. Like I think it's high risk. It's exceptional hitting. He makes some mistakes, but he's going for smart things, and he's a smart player. And I think that combination of tactical smarts alongside brilliant ball striking, like how can you not love that?
Totally. And I think there's a thing that I always look for and I always try and get a sense of in interviews is the way that players talk about other players. And I think so often in the sporting world, we very rarely get a glimpse into how people actually feel about other players, about how like the best truly see the competition and the people that they are up against. And I think that the point that I make about Nalbandian is that you hear the way that players talk through all of the PR and through all of the double speak and all the things that go out there. There is a longing and an ambition for him to achieve greater success. And I think if you hear the way that the players talked about him, it is from a position of this guy's really, really damn good. It is the same way that you hear the way that Federer and Nadal talk about Kyrgios as well, and why you see so many tennis fans getting frustrated at someone like Nick Kyrgios in terms of his tennis ability is when like the 2 best players in the world and possibly 2 of the best players of all time are talking about this dude as being, wow, this guy's really good. This guy's really, really genuinely good. You sort of get an insight into how talented someone is. And I think the same point could be made about Nalbandian is the way that Federer talked about him specifically, saying that he reads the game unbelievably and his ball striking is so crisp that it's just a marvel that he didn't have more success than he did.
Ended in 2013. It didn't end on a super positive note. There was that incident at the Queen's Club. He was disqualified after kicking out and hitting a linesperson. Really awful around Bush. It was bad.
Yeah, it sucked. The famous image, of course, of the linesperson with blood dripping out of their forehead. It's not a good scene, especially with the white clothing and everything else going on at Queen's Club, and so many strawberries were spat out in shock and disgust at this whole thing, and monocles were dropped, and everything was going wrong. It's not a good situation. I mock it and say that it's funny because it's Queen's Club and it's all hoity-toity, but yeah, bad situation. Dude didn't cover himself in a whole lot of glory and had a few run-ins that he didn't act like a particularly nice person, shall we say, on tour and on court. The back half of his career, nothing to write home about, it has to be said. Never got to the heights again of 2007, and really it is this flash in the pan. And it is really that period of time where he realized the potential. He realized everything that he could do and could achieve, and what it resulted in was pretty spectacular, but it was very fleeting and pretty ephemeral.
That incident at Queen's Club was broadcast nationally on the BBC as well, so he's a bit of a pariah and got spanked at Wimbledon by Tipsarevic. Tipsarevic beat him again at the London Olympics in 2012. He withdraws from the 2012 US Open with a strained muscle in his chest, and then Davis Cup is basically it in 2013. October 1st, 2013, Nalbandian announced his retirement, and Bush, I think you mentioned it, got into rally car driving. Mostly he races an Argentine specification Chevrolet Agile? I don't know. Wow, it's a car, okay. Okay, this is
No, keep going. I'm on the edge of my seat here. Please keep going.
Apparently it is a circuit where you can only run this type of Chevy that is only made in Brazil and Argentina. Okay. Well, that is random and interesting, and I hope he's having fun with things, but it leads me to the final question. Bush, the best player to never win a Grand Slam, is it Nalbandian?
I mean, it's such a wide question, isn't it? It's such a difficult one to answer, given what do you base that off? Do you base that off position in the world? Because you would argue that someone like Marcelo Rios was a world number one who never achieved that potential. You could argue someone like Carlos Moya would be in that category as well. Wait a minute, am I perjuring myself on a radio? Moya didn't win a Grand Slam, right? I'm completely corrected in that.
I believe he did.
He did? No, surely not. All right, that's it. I'm editing this part out. Clay, save me.
Carlos Moya won the French Open.
He did. Damn it.
Disband Open era. Disband the show. We flew too close to the sun. 1998, Bush. But anyways, continue. I think what you're getting at is that really, like, I'm looking at a couple lists, and on the ATP side, like, you got, like, for me, Davydenko might be the fairer shout, because I think he just did it for, like, David Ferrer and Davydenko, I feel like put in enough work where they deserve that kind of payout. Where I don't know if Nalbandian really put it in.
I'm not having this. I'm not having this. I understand if
you're not having the show, like the participation medal version of a Grand Slam, where just because you hung around long enough you deserve a Grand Slam. You're not having that?
I'm not having that at all. Like, in what possible capacity, given the players that have never won a Grand Slam, is Nikolai Davydenko the best of all of them? Davydenko is a solid, good, top 10 player who I'm aware got to top 5 in the world. Do you think there was ever a period of time where you thought that Nikolai Davydenko was going to win a Grand Slam, given who his competition was against?
Push, the problem is a lot of guys have won Grand Slams. So, like, there's this list that I'm mentioning. Like, Robin Soderling is on this list I'm looking at. Miroslav Mercer, Todd Martin. Like, a lot of guys
Todd
won
Martin's
slams.
a pretty good shout, isn't it, to be honest?
And Marcelo Rios, I think, you want to talk about, like, pure talent. Rios and flaming out spectacularly. Like, Marcelo Rios is an interesting case because he definitely had everything you needed. But what this goes to show is that I think he is definitely in the conversation, because it's a weird list of guys who were good, but like should have. Maybe it's right they never got a Grand Slam. Maybe that's justice that they didn't get it.
Yeah, I think he's right up there. He's certainly within a list that you don't want to be in, but he's certainly in that top 3 of players that had never won a Grand Slam. I would argue, out of pure talent alone, I don't know how many players in the world could have done what he did during that 2-week period against the caliber of players that he was playing against. Out of that list, I would struggle to say that any of them could have put together that many quality matches against quality opposition and, quite frankly, blown them off the court. I don't think that Robin Soderling is beating Roger Federer twice within 2 weeks and Rafael Nadal twice in 2 weeks. I just don't think he's doing it, regardless of the court that he's on, regardless of how quick the surface is and everything working in his favor. I don't think that Nikolai Davydenko is doing it. I think only David Nalbandian was capable of doing it at that period of time.
Well, if we have any angel investors who can kind of set up some sort of time travel-based Davydenko-Nalbandian final, then we'll settle this. But it's a fair shout. I don't know. The Queen's Club thing really did kind of end things on a terrible note. In terms of like my personal fondness for Nalbandian, this definitely helped things. I mean, you look back at this, boy, isn't it nice to see some guys bully the big 3 and really not wilt and not give a damn that they're big 3. Obviously, the context is way different. Nobody knew that these are 3 GOATs literally back to back to back. But I don't know. We're talking about tour strength and parity and when was it better and what was the best era. But these journeyman grinders who were really, really good, kind of missed them.
And I think he has the perfect game that if you were looking for a player to be constructed in a lab to beat these 3 dudes, it is someone who is a clean ball striker who can hug the baseline, absorb pace, and give it back to them. Not be overawed by the movement and the variety, but just outright beat them at their own game. Even though they have different game styles, he pretty much stayed doing exactly the same thing that he always did, and he was just better at it than all three of them during this tournament and the following week. I think there's probably something in this, and I know it's a strange thing to say, but I would give some advice to someone like Felix Auger-Aliassime. Watch these highlights. Watch how he sticks to the baseline and bullies people around, and do more of that. Don't be 9 feet behind the baseline, because they'll just control it and take it away from you. And if you're talented enough to do it and not go overpowered, and you can read the game well enough and have the agility, then why wouldn't you do it? And I think he is a player that would really benefit from watching some of Nalbandian's old tape.
That was the 2007 Madrid Open. David Nalbandian doing the unthinkable. Bush, anything we've missed that you want to touch on?
I don't think so. I think we had a good dive into Madrid. I will mention that we touched upon blue clay just briefly, and I would encourage everyone to go back and look at the history of the Madrid Open. It is great. There's a lot of great stuff within there ever since 2002. Different owners, some bankruptcy, 3 changes of surface, billionaires being involved. The cream of the crop in terms of players who have been attracted to that tournament and winning it, and its place in the calendar as well. We don't often talk about tournaments as a thing. We always talk about players, but as an entity, it's a pretty fun tournament to do some research into as well.
Didn't Fed win that blue clay Madrid tournament? Because it was basically a hard court in the middle of
it was
the clays. Oh, I love that. I love that. I love how mad everyone was. They're like, what the hell is this blue monstrosity? And they literally changed it right after.
That's the solution, by the way, of how you make the US Open good. I'm serious. USTA, hit us up, Open Era. We love you really. Invite us to all the events. But the US Open should be on blue clay. I'm sticking to that, and it really should be.
It's a bombshell to end it. I love it. We are on Patreon, patreon.com/Open Era. $3 a month goes to helping the pod and helps us keep doing what we're doing. It's much appreciated. We're also on Twitter @Open Era Pod. Shoot us questions, suggestions, anything like that. And that is it. Thanks for listening, as always, and we'll talk to you next week.